Hey everyone, I'm Hickory from Millionaire.com, and thank you again for joining us for another video. Today's topic is about Fed days. So, what are Fed days? Why do we care? And when exactly are they? I have a friend that's a day trader, and he told me on Fed days he doesn't do any trading at all. I asked him simply, why do you not do that? He says, on Fed days, for what he's doing in the stock market, he says it fluctuates a little bit too much. It's more unpredictable for him for what he's comfortable with. So I said, okay, does that affect me? A lot of my strategies are really simple buy and hold strategies for stock investing, for ETFs, for mutual funds. I'm a lot more conservative in that count. I'm not a day trader. So does the fluctuations with a Fed day affect me? The short answer is no. The short answer explanation, statistically speaking, Fed days really don't affect me at all, and shouldn't affect you if you're doing the same type of trading, the real simple kind of buy and hold strategies, because we're not really purposely trying to time the market. Like I said, statistically speaking, it is better for you to go ahead and start doing stock trading, investing in ETFs, mutual funds, single stocks, and depending on what research and everything you've done. As long as you're getting into it, timing the market can be really too risky. A lot of the statistics out there these days show that if you're trying to do a lot of timing, you miss out for the majority of times on profit that you just didn't simply expect if you weren't just doing it in regular increments, like say with like your paycheck for your mutual funds, for your like 401k or your Roth IRA or anything like that. So get out there, do your research, go ahead and start investing. I don't worry about timing the market, and I do wonderfully. So let's get back to basics. What is a Fed day? A Fed day is when the Federal Reserve gets together and perform what I consider 4 functions. Now these functions usually help dictate the interest rate that you might be getting on a mortgage. And it also dictates on how a business might be able to get a loan from a bank. They deal with interest rates, and that also affects the management of inflation for the entire United States. So, and they enforce these rules upon the banks that you borrow from. So like I was just mentioning now, if you're out getting a mortgage right now, you might pay extra attention to when a Fed date is coming up and trying to see or trying to read into it if they're going to be raising rates or if they're going to be lowering rates. So for instance, if the Fed decide on one of these Fed dates, announce that they're raising rates, then they'll force the banks to increase the rates for like your mortgage. So a mortgage rate will cost you more, of course, if they raise the rate. Same effect if they lower it, mortgages will be cheaper. You won't have to pay as much interest on it. You can see how that also affects small businesses, because whenever they go in for, or even large businesses, whenever they go in to try to get a loan or try to get more money to either expand or put out a new product line for their business, if rates are going up, then there might be less likely to go ahead and try expanding or borrowing that money, depending on their own financial position. So you can also see if that affects small businesses or even large businesses, that will also affect the stock market. So if you're raising up rates and businesses are not getting those loans, if they decide to go ahead and wait and see if they are lowered again later on in the year, or just decide to do something completely different because the rate is too high for them, they don't want to take that much risk of interest on a loan, then businesses are not expanding, they're not growing, and to a lot of people that are investing in stock markets get real leery. They start selling off different stocks or kind of holding off. That's one of the ways that you'll see leading up to a Fed day, and on the day you'll see the stock market fluctuate a lot more than usual. But even telling you that, that's not necessarily true. It's the crazy thing about the stock market. A lot of this stuff is general, and we are looking for these things, and most of the time you do see it fluctuate, but it's never definite. Nothing is ever definite in the stock market. It's more of a roller coaster. There's times, especially if you're doing day trading, I consider that gambling, no matter how informed you are. it really you have to be careful on what you're doing at the time. So what are the four functions of the Federal Reserve? And now, these are the four functions that I consider. You could actually kind of group some of these together because they are pretty similar, but I think they're distinct enough where you can actually read into them a little bit more. So number one, the first function that I consider is they manage and they supervise the banking system. So they're kind of like the overseers. They're making sure everything is legitimate. Next is they're managing inflation. Like I said before, with the interest rates, that will also adjust how the inflation for the United States goes up and down. So number two is managing inflation. Number three is providing banking services. Not really necessarily what I would say banking service to the average person, but it falls in line with the supervision of banks themselves. They have sometimes considered, depending who you're speaking with, consider the Federal Reserve as the bank for banks or bank for bankers. So they help provide banking services in that sense. So the fourth function, and probably the most important one, which you can actually lump some of the other topics in, is overall they are trying to manage and supervise and stabilize the entire financial system. So it's interesting how the Federal Reserve has this balance of power. They create over time with different issues and things that have come up throughout our financial history. They create new tools and new mechanisms to help with that overall stability. For instance, after the Great Recession with the housing market, sometime around 2008, years later after that, what came out of that was the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act. And then a few years later after that, which is actually not too long ago, it was passed, and I'm going to read this so I don't mess this up, the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act. That was passed after the Dodd-Frank, and it actually took some of the bite, some of the power out of the Dodd-Frank. Now, those two areas are actually interesting topics, but it's beyond the scope of this video, at least at this time. I do recommend you go ahead and looking up those. It's really interesting whenever you look into the Federal Reserve and some of these acts, some of these tools, and some of these mechanisms that they use to help with inflation, stability, and to make sure everybody is legitimate and some of the big screw-ups don't happen again, such as the housing market crash in around 2008. All right, so how about when does the Federal Reserve, when are these Fed days? When do this Federal Reserve actually meet? It's 8 times a year, and usually it's over a period of about 2 days. And I'll go ahead and actually read you the list for 2019. So this is with the Federal Open Market Committee. They meet in 2019. Some of these dates have already passed. But in 2019, January 29th and 30th, March 19th and 20th, April 30th and May 1st, June 18th and 19th, July 30th and 31st, September 17th and 18th, October 29th and 30th, and December 10th and 11th. So that's the tentative schedule that the Federal Reserve has for 2019. It's also important, I'm going to be putting a link down below that has this calendar in it. What's interesting, this is the government's main website. You can actually go in there and actually both listen and watch different videos and things to see the results of some of the previous times that they have met. So it's kind of interesting to look through and go through that again. It's kind of nice to keep these dates in mind, especially if you are doing stock trading, investing. I was going to say, even though if you're doing like simple stuff like me, buy and hold, I still think it's interesting to keep an eye out for that, just to kind of be an observer, maybe even an external observer of how these things affect the stock market. And then also watch how the news media and how people all over the place, even on here on the internet, react and with sensational stories whenever these Fed dates kind of crop up. You'll see them react each time leading up and on those days, and then everything will quiet off and they'll go on to the next topic and the next sensational blip that's on the stock market. It's best just really to kind of coast along, keep an eye on things, do your own research, and relax, and don't jump in and out. Like I said, I'm not a day trader. I don't recommend you doing it. Even if you know what you're doing, I just don't recommend you doing it. You're statistically more likely to lose your money. Oh, I forgot to tell you again. So sorry if you are a day trader. There are some people that do actually make some really good money. I do know a couple people that do that, and they have been successful. They're part of the 10%. 90% of people fail within a year. I do know a couple people that are actually good at that and continue to do it. So there are exceptions. I'm not an exception. I'm good with what I do, and I make more money than a lot of them. So I am perfectly fine doing this really boring, slow route. If you can be a day trader and successful at it, that's great. That's wonderful. It's just not something for me. So to each their own, really. Also, I wanted to say, if you like this video, please like, subscribe, do all the usual stuff, hit the little bell, and you can continue looking at coming back here for videos. Also, my website, comfymillionaire.com. You can go there to look at blog posts. We have a resource page that points you to different books and links. So thank you very much for joining us.